Buckeye Talk video version from cleveland.com. Try the texts.
What was the most important things for you as far as what the Big Ten should be considering right now to come up with a plan for the football schedule?
Three things were most important. One, I had to throw out the idea of them competing in a college football playoff because it's not happening. It's not something that's going to happen this year. And so you have to throw that out. You can't have that hope in there of, oh, let's start in this month or in this week because then we can play catch up and, have a chance to play in the playoffs this year. Ohio State is not playing in the playoff this year. Oregon is not either. Pac-12 and Big Ten teams are not playing in the playoff. So you have to come to that reality before you start anything because if not, it's going to screw up the entire way you do this. That's one. Two, I wanted to create as much of a bubble as possible in a natural way without having to force it. So then the NCAA can still keep that, facade of they're still student athletes and are not professionals. And so if you do it at a time where it's maybe a bubble effect anyway, you can kind of get away with it. And then three, I wanted to leave as much space as possible between draft prep and when the season would actually end so that guys like Justin Fields and Wyatt Davis and maybe Shaun Wade, but probably most likely not. If Randy's listening to this, he's probably yelling, nope, Shaun Wade's not playing. But guys like Josh Myers, Chris Olave could have enough time to where if they really wanted to play another season at Ohio State, they could play it and still have enough time to recover from that season and get ready for the draft. So, just look at the NBA. This is what they did. 14 days of quarantine, and then they started maybe 2 weeks of practicing, and then they got into the season. So that by now they're in the groove of how they're doing things, and they've had 0 positive tests of COVID the entire time they've been down there. I'm not saying it's going to be that perfect, but the idea of no one is on campus but players, just like it would be in a normal season in December, because Ohio State would be preparing for a bowl game, and students would be at home because finals would be over. So you don't have to worry about that. So there's your manufactured bubble. So now – everybody plays 8 games, and I have some sites. I have 3 dome sites, so they're all neutral sites. I have Indianapolis, Detroit, and Minnesota. You play all the Big Ten – any game that is a Big Ten East team against a Big Ten East team, you play in Indianapolis. Big Ten West teams against Big Ten West teams play in Minnesota, and then you have all the crossover games at Detroit. And you play 2 games at each site each week, which means there's 2 teams who are on a bye each week. So now you've got basically, 9 or 10 weeks – to play 8 games for everybody else. And you can close out the season on January 23rd with a Big Ten championship game. And then either January 30th or February 6th, you can have a Big Ten versus Pac-12 champion. They play each other in the Rose Bowl, and that's how you get it. And by February 6th, maybe you leave a little bit of room for yourself, so maybe it goes into the next week, February 13th. But the idea is by mid-February, the season is done.
I went kind of the complete opposite way.
Ooh, this is good. So, good. Now we can have it.
So I had, a couple of things. So for me, I thought about Thanksgiving. I understand why people like it better maybe than January. By the way, none of our texters liked it. I don't think there was very little support for starting a season at Thanksgiving. There was very little support when I talked to the Ohio State parents last week, and we had heard that within Ohio State's program there was some support for it because they think it makes it even more likely that some of these NFL-bound guys might stick around and play than it would if you waited till January. But I think the biggest deterrent that people have for it is that it doesn't get you in the playoff. And I know you're saying that shouldn't be a factor. I tend to think it shouldn't. If you're making a medical decision, then whether or not Ohio State can win a national championship shouldn't be a factor either. But I also think that if you're doing the prudent thing right now, you would create a schedule that would put that option on the table. I may have cheated a little bit, but since I'm kind of in the role of Doug, and I feel like I can do that a little bit. I also said no domes, and my reason was I understand why that's been floated out there, especially in terms of the winter season. I know why people are saying, well, if you're going to start playing in January, February, put everybody in domes because nobody wants to be outside in Minnesota and Wisconsin and Michigan and Ohio even in January and February. My thing is, though, I'm going to be a pretty tight schedule when you see what I came up with. And you're trying to make as much money as you can off of the media rights here. And I feel like the facility rental to get the domes, the traveling that both teams would be doing in order to go to the domes for every single game. I know one team would have to travel for all games, but then both teams traveling for all these games. I don't know that I see the point of that expense. And in the back of my mind, yes, there are some things that go along with the travel and related to the pandemic and that being a possible issue. So I kind of nixed that from my thinking too. So here's what I came up with. December 12th, I worked backwards. December 12th, Big Ten championship game. The college football playoff makes its decision on December 20th. Give yourself another week of leeway in case you need to push things back. Schedule the Big Ten championship game for December 12th. And then count forward 9 weeks from there forward. You play only division games. So a 6-game schedule over 9 weeks. So starting October 10th, you would play a 6-game, 9-week schedule. You'd have 3 bye weeks mixed in there for everybody, for postponements, for if a quarantine comes up, just to give yourself that kind of peace of mind. But you are playing a really tight schedule. And part of that is, again, because I almost think at this point, fall 2021 should be the number one priority. Get what you can out of this. If you can make a plan like this work, try to sneak it in and try to get into the playoff. But my big number one, the overriding thing of all this is, so I guess so October 10th means you'd have to start camp pretty soon. You'd have to start camp in like 2 weeks. Which
is not viable. Go ahead. Well, we can argue after. Get your plan.
Right. Well, what I'm saying is you get up to that point. If it's not, this is my plan that I would put on paper right now. But if you get to that point, September 10th, September whatever, and you feel like you can't start practice, you pull the plug on everything and push back to your plan B, which is January. So you'd really be coming up with 2 plans. You would just move all of this back to January.